Missouri politicians want to create a pregnancy registry. What could go wrong? The assault on trans rights is ever linked to reproductive rights, and Minnesota State Rep Leigh Finke is here to talk about her work creating a safe haven for bodily autonomy in Minnesota and beyond. Plus, Rewire News Group, our favorite source for all things reproductive health, rights, and justice, just got a new executive director. Veteran journalist Mallory joins to talk about her new gig at Rewire and lays out that just like healthcare, comprehensive media coverage on reproductive care has never existed, and how that, plus taking a knee to our oppressors, has led us to this reproductive crisis. All that, I'll take your questions, and a steaming dump of this week's abortion news, all coming up on this episode of the Feminist Buzzkills podcast. FBK, the show run exclusively by oligarchs. That's right. I'm Liz Winstead, and my co-host Moji Alawodale is out this week celebrating her birthday. And so we are wishing our favorite Pisces all the fun and chill she can muster. So it's been a week, y'all, and before we get started, I just want to chat about, there was this massive group of actions called the 50-51 last weekend, and I didn't go. And there was a lot of controversy around it, but I just didn't go because in this world order we're living in, you know what? If I don't have info about who's creating gathering spaces for progressives and queer people and undocumented people, I'm just feeling like it's a little different. Normally I'd be like, give me a sign, I'm in, I'll go, I'll lay my body on the line. But like right now, I just need to know like what local organizations have buy-in, who's sponsoring it, are there legal observers? Maybe I'm just old or maybe I'm just paranoid, but if I don't know who's sponsoring or if there's not a place that I can reach out to for questions, or if there's not like information where I can gather what to do if I'm in danger, or who do I reach out to if I'm arrested, I just don't think I can fuck with it. It just feels like, I don't know, anybody who falls into the DEI umbrella could either be rounded up by ICE or fucking Proud Boy, Oath Keeper, psychopaths could show up with weapons and, just decide they were going to be heroes. And so maybe that sounds nuts and maybe I'm missing out, but my personal bottom line is I just need to know that we're going to be safe. If we get arrested, we have places to go, and that somebody is on the lookout for neo-Nazis who might show up. So that's where I'm at. You should always ask questions and be there. So that's what I'm scared about, which kind of leads nicely into this new segment that we want to do on the pod. Moji and I talk constantly and hear constantly from folks who are bombarded with information, don't know how much of it is garbage, how much of it they should be concerned about. And since we eat, live, and breathe this shit, we thought, we need to do a segment on the podcast where people can throw questions at us and we can at least give them context. We may not be able to make you feel good about it, but at least we can give you a gauge of how and where you need to be thinking about putting those feelings about it, what you can do to make change, and all that stuff. So we got a couple of questions this week. Our first one came in a text. Hi, I'm Kristen. I know we codified abortion in Ohio, but how worried should I be about a national abortion ban? Would that trump, no pun intended, that's Kristen's words, our constitutional amendment? Yikes. Kristen, the short answer is yes, because we've already seen them chomping at the bit at introducing a federal abortion ban. Just like we try to fight for like federal EMTALA laws, where the federal law says that emergency rooms, wherever they are, have to help somebody access abortion if it saves their health, even if there's abortion bans in that state. A federal abortion ban would trump all of the hard work that these states have had. It's our biggest fear, right? Tell people constantly that they need to be paying attention to their local legislators, because abortion ban that happen in a state level are often the bans that go through the court system and then make it to the Supreme Court, and that we are paying attention to who we're electing, not only in state and local governments, but in federal benches, who gets appointed, who we elect in our state Supreme Courts. Wisconsin right now is in the fight for its life, and they are either going to choose a Supreme Court justice that's going to help roll back Wisconsin's draconian abortion bans, or somebody who is actively wanting to promote them. So those judicial elections are super important. Also, your attorneys general. Look to see who's on your attorneys general list and see what they believe in, because that might be the most important statewide office that we're all thinking about. So I'm sorry it's not better news, but hopefully I gave you some stuff that you can do to protect yourself and your community. So, Kristen, how scared should you be on a scale from 0 to 5, 0 being you're fine, don't worry about it, have all the abortions you want whenever you want, and 5 being the entire Doge crew has moved into your uterus? I'm going to say right now you're in Ohio, you're at a 3 because you do have protections and you have strong activists on the ground, and we can hook you up with some of those organizations. But with this looming RFK wanting to sort of put federal regulations in place around abortion, and a whole Congress and president and Senate that are anti-abortion and do want a federal abortion ban, that's the part that's scary. So for now, you're fine, but be vigilant. Okay, this next one is a voicemail.
Hi, this is Alyssa. I live in Pennsylvania, and I follow your socials, and I saw you talking about this video that conservatives are showing in schools to kids, and I guess I just don't understand why this is bad. It seems like it's a fetal development video, like it shows like the stages of pregnancy, and so what should we be looking out for that is so dangerous? And like, if this is coming to our communities, what can we do? Thanks for the podcast. Have a good day.
Yeah. So I think what Alyssa from Pennsylvania is referring to is there's a series of educational videos that have been created by an extremely anti-abortion organization called Live Action, and they're animated videos. There's 5 states who are currently trying to force them into curriculum: Arkansas, Iowa, Tennessee, West Virginia, and North Dakota. So you're in Pennsylvania, so I think you're safe about those coming to your school system. I think when you say what's wrong with showing these educational videos, I think the context of them is super important. Like I said, they're created from an anti-abortion organization that is widely known for disseminating terrible, terrible information. To the videos, not only are they wildly inaccurate around gestation, they also push an abstinence only agenda. Also, these same states and this same organization has fought really hard to get comprehensive sex education and, sexual health education out of their state schools. So all of these states have opt-in programs. So if this is the only thing your kid is learning and it's wrong and it's abstinence based, it's a problem. Also, when you have to animate something, you just make up stuff. We'll post the video in our link, because when you see, it's literally looks like a 6-year-old kid on a bike in this video. I mean, it's like, what are you even talking about? Like, so it's just problematic. And then lastly, these same groups that made this video and that are really pushing, and politicians that are really pushing for this video to be in the schools, are the same people who are fighting to ban books, banning LGBTQ education, harming trans kids. So they're promoting dangerous, inaccurate sexual health in a myriad of ways, and this video is just one of them. So while Pennsylvania probably won't have this in their schools, it's worrisome that it's going into any public school systems, especially the ones that are teaching nothing else comprehensive. So on the scale of 1 to 5 of whether or not you should be scared, the 1, the 5, I'm going to say in Pennsylvania, you're at a 1. You don't need to worry, because Pennsylvania is going to protect. They actually care about good education. But we're seeing trends around this in states that don't have good access to actual sexual health education. So I don't see it becoming a national law, but I do see it becoming a seeping suck of sewage in our education system in other states. So I'm going to say you're at a 1, the nation's at a 3. Thanks a lot, Kristen and Alyssa, for writing in and calling in. I hope that hope this helped. And if you want your concerns about the state of abortion access to be addressed here on the show, please, please, please call or text us at 201 574-7402. Leave your first name, your state, and fire away. Moji and I will get to as many questions as we can. The number will be in the show notes. Again, text or call 201-574-7402, and we will do our best to give you some advice and perspective. Whoa. I mean, it's like the dearth of this kind of information is so great. And it's why we love to do the show, because this info is not given enough attention in the media or anywhere. So if you love it, help us spread the word, help us educate people in your life. Show us some love, give us 5 stars, like and subscribe to the podcast, spread the word. Every bit helps in getting more listeners and educating more people. Let's move on, folks. We have a lot of show to cover, and we're just starting. So we're going to get to a steaming dump of this week's abortion news. J.D. Vance finished his EU bashapalooza by lying about a new Scottish law that establishes safe zones which bans protesters from screaming outside of abortion clinics. Vance claimed the Scottish government sent a threatening letter to residents who live near the clinics, instructing them that this new law bans them from praying in their homes. The author of the law fired back, saying the bill does no such thing and that no such letter was ever sent. Vance continued his rant, warning the crowd about woke haggis, a new dish made of organs harvested from the cats and dogs stolen by undocumented abortion providers. Maybe read the bill you wrote, bro. This week, West Virginia Senate Majority Whip Jay Taylor introduced a bill that would remove rape and incest exceptions from the state's abortion law, and nary 24 hours later, he withdrew that shit because the public hated it. Taylor claimed he didn't realize the bill he wrote to remove rape and incest exceptions would have removed rape and incest exceptions. But wait, there's more. Another asshole submitted an identical bill like 2 seconds later. Holy fuck, when will this sexist seesaw end? Can we officially start calling it Worst Virginia? Now? And finally, Donald Trump, the self-professed father of IVF, issued an executive order asking for policy recommendations to protect access to and reduce out-of-pocket costs for IVF. I mean, not for nothing, making IVF cheaper is technically lowering the price of eggs. You just got to insert them into your uterus. And that was your steaming news dump. Before we get to the stories I'm going to dig deeper into, we have some fun business to take care of. As we reported last week, Michael Shannon, yes, that Michael Shannon, and the amazing musician Jason Narducci kicked off a tour covering REM's Fables of the Reconstruction. It looks amazing. The reason we talk about it is because they have designed incredible commemorative posters, and the proceeds for the posters go to Abortion Access Fund to support our work. Plus, AAF and a local clinic is going to be at most of the shows at a table talking about abortion, getting you activated locally. So stop by the table and say hi if you're going to one of these shows, grab a poster, get some stickers, and make a donation to support your local abortion providers and Abortion AAF. That's a lot of A's. It's all part of our Adopt a Clinic program, and we are so blown away at the responses we had in LA, San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle. So next week, look for the gang. We'll put the link to all of their dates. Get tickets if you're in one of those cities. Go, go, go. Also, we are headed to the Supreme Court April 2nd. Yep, South Carolina is doing the least and bringing us there, because it seems like with South Carolina, it's just not enough to institute a total abortion ban and then try to impose the death penalty if you have an abortion in the state. Nope, that's not enough. In this case, they're fighting Planned Parenthood because they believe Medicaid funding should not be given to Planned Parenthood for pap smears, birth control, wellness visits, because Planned Parenthood provides abortions in other states, y'all. It's so gross. So we're going to be in DC to protest, get into some good trouble, and do a live podcast. More about that later. But if you're thinking about joining us, please fill out the form in our show notes. Come down. You can literally fill out the form and tell us what your level of spice is. Maybe you just want to be outside with a sign outside of the court. Maybe you want to do some fun actions. Who knows? Maybe you want to come to the podcast. It's all going to be great. So link in the show notes, sign up and join us April 2nd. We hope to see you. Whoa, let's get to the stories of the week. Woof. I am like gobsmacked. Like, I never think I can be gobsmacked, and then I get gobsmacked. I'm gobsmacked for two reasons. One, that Missouri found a new low with which to introduce a bill. But two, and I'm about to tell you in a second what's going on, that people fought back. So, first, let's get to this creepy bill. Missouri has been doing the most. As you know, we've been reporting on how they're fighting like hell to try to not let this constitutional amendment that their state voted for to allow abortion. Finally, they got shut down on that. And their latest shenanigans is, wait for it, they want to create a state-run registry of all pregnant people. And then if you are somebody who is thinking about an abortion, you would add that to the registry. And what this goon squad is justifying as why they want to do this is they want to reduce abortions by giving access to people seeking to adopt a kid to this registry. So basically, they can troll the registry and then stalk people who are thinking about abortion and try to convince them and pressure them and shame them into, instead of having abortion, carrying the pregnancy to term and then giving the baby to them. It is so creepy. And it mildly, quite frankly, to me, sounds like it's like some legalized version of like stalking someone and trafficking light. It's so weird. An adoption attorney in Missouri who worked on the bill actually said, we're looking to make it something like eHarmony for a baby. eHarmony, we harmony. Like what, you know what I would call it? I would call it Kinder. Swipe right into Gilead. That's what I would say. And this whole, let's create all these ways where we can talk people out of their abortions and into adoption, as though pregnancy and delivery are just small things. Like, you know, you're just potting soil. So just have a baby and give it to somebody else. It drives me insane that this is a narrative loop that I hear in all circles, not just anti-circles, but like also in like people who say they're pro-choice circles. And what I'm about to tell you next gives me hope. So this bill was introduced and there was so much public outcry that Republicans who had put two of the similar bills forth withdrew those bills. And it really works to show up, y'all. And I feel like the narrative is being heard by people differently. And I'm going to use this opportunity to just remind people of something that I think is really important. Choosing to give up your child for adoption isn't the alternative to abortion. It's the alternative to parenting. Abortion is the alternative to being pregnant. Let's be clear. You do not owe your pregnancy to anybody. And the fact that any state thinks that this is an alternative is like just spooky as fuck. It really is just spooky as fuck. So that is just next level. And abortion is almost as next level. I'm trying to decide if it's the assault on abortion right now, not that it's a contest, but is the assault on abortion as intense as the assault on trans folks? Because I feel like all of these things are tied together. And I think that we don't talk about it being tied together enough. And that is why I was so excited as we're watching these assaults on abortion access, on trans rights, on LGBTQ rights, that we have somebody on this week who can really talk about how this all ties together. So let's talk about sex and gender, how they differ, how fighting for bodily autonomy means that abortion rights, trans rights, and all of our rights are linked, and that we always need to stand up for all of them with that framework always. The assault on the existence of trans and non-binary folks has been relentless. We've seen it from bathroom bills to kids in sports to allowing trans kids to thrive. It's even less safe now more than ever for trans folks in America. So, my first guest is on the front lines in Minnesota fighting for the liberation of us all. In her work as the first trans woman elected to the Minnesota legislature, she is tirelessly fighting to create a safer world for trans and queer families, women, and all the rest of us dirty DEIs. Here to talk about all of it is Minnesota Representative Leigh Finke.
Hello, Liz. Thank you for the invitation.
I'm so excited to see you. One of the reasons I'm so excited to see you is that we ran into each other when it was a jillion degrees below zero on the steps of the Minnesota Capitol, fighting for our liberation then. And anybody who's willing to go out in the cold has a standing invitation to talk to me at any point.
Yeah, I mean, you had just an unbelievable jumpsuit on, a winter snowsuit. It was wonderful and glorious, and I'm so excited to be back. It is bajillion degrees below zero again today as well. So perfect timing.
It's perfect timing. So I just want to talk a little bit about your history before we dive into the current work you're doing. So, you slid into the Minnesota House in 2022 based on your activism work. Tell folks how you decided to get into, I'm going to say thankless because it's so hard, job of actually politics and representing the folks of Minnesota.
Yeah, so I have only been elected. I was elected the first time in 2022. So I just started my second 2-year term. And before that, I was working at ACLU Minnesota as a multimedia storyteller. Before that, I was working in journalism and filmmaking and activism. As you said, I have been in activism since the Iraq War in 2003. I was in college. That really radicalized me towards street protest and movement building. And I've been doing that work ever since. I never planned to be a politician, though. That was not really in the cards, primarily just because I never thought about it. I live in St. Paul. I live in a blue center where there's a million white people who want to run for office. And I just never even occurred to me to be an option until I started organizing to get a trans person into office in the state of Minnesota. So it became clear as the sort of national organized campaign against trans people was taking shape over 2016 to 2020 that we needed people everywhere. And while I was doing that work, trying to figure out an option, my seat, my district had an opening. We had a retirement. And all these people that I was sort of talking to about this work said, well, you have a seat now, so you have to be the one who runs for it. I sort of fell into my lap because of redistricting and retirements. And I thought, oh, they're right. I need to do it. If I'm trying to get other people to do it, then that means I have to do it too.
Well, I feel really thankful that you did. And it's been just a shit show. It's post Roe and the world we're living in. And I want folks to understand that as on a national level, we are watching this coup happen. The Minnesota State House was literally having a coup of their own. Can you explain to people what happened in January this year in Minnesota and what is currently going on?
Yes, it's a great question. It's a very complicated question, but we had a trifecta for the last biennium. We passed an immense amount of protections, Minnesota Miracle, a lot of progressive protections for abortion, for trans folks, queer folks, everything that we could do for all of our communities. And then we went to our reelection in the Trump year, and the Minnesota House approved a tie, right? So we had 67-67 elected to the Minnesota House. After the election, one of the DFLers elections was challenged successfully in court.
I just want to say for those people listening, DFL is the Minnesota Democratic Party. It's called the Democrat Farm Labor Party.
Yes. Thank you very much for that clarity. So one of the Democrats had their election thrown out in court. So we were down a member, and we were only going to be down a member for a couple of weeks. And the Republicans wanted to use their couple of week advantage to cement 2 years of Republican control, majority control in the House, which they did not have. They did not have the votes for. I mean, this gets really long and gross, but really what happened is they showed up and assumed power based on the fact of their 67 to our 66, but the state law and now Supreme Court verified state law says a quorum is 68. So the first thing they did is walk into the House chamber and break their oath of office by claiming power that they did not have the votes to secure. So the Democrats held out. We denied quorum, did not go into the floor, into the Capitol for a little over 3 weeks. And it became a really nasty situation, honestly. It's very complicated, but really what happened is they wanted to deny the elections of Democrats and use that as a way to cement a 2-year majority. And we said we would not have that.
Were they able to do any damage?
They did damage to the political landscape of the state of Minnesota, but they can't pass anything. And that's the thing that made their actions so absurd, is that even if they had the majority of 67 to seat themselves, the law in Minnesota is that you need 68 votes to pass a bill. So we could have all sat here while no one did anything, and we didn't want to allow them to do that. So until we had a fair power sharing agreement and an agreement that they would respect the outcomes of the elections, this comes right from the Trump playbook. There was a very close election in Minnesota, 14 votes, and they are absolutely committed to not seating that member. And that's why we had to hold out. You can't just have an election overturned because you want it to be.
And the thing I find fascinating is the slim majorities when they win, or, they always call it a mandate. But the truth is, the work that you have done and your election was indeed a mandate. Minnesotans wanted protections. They wanted abortion protections, they wanted trans rights protections, they wanted people to feel safe in our community, they wanted the environment protected, everything. And you authored the Minnesota Trans Refuge Bill, and it's at present, Minnesota is a refuge for trans families. But I'm so curious because of just like what you said in the tentativeness of the Minnesota legislature and Senate, how solid are these protections right now? And what can people do to make sure they're even more solid?
It's a really great question, and I'm glad you asked it because I do want people to know that the law in the state of Minnesota remains the law in the state of Minnesota. There has been a lot of drama happening in the Minnesota political landscape, but it is in the House of Representatives. Democrats have a majority in the Senate, and the Democrats hold Governor Walz as our governor. Unfortunately, not our vice president, but we're still very grateful to have him as our governor. So none of the work that will happen in the House this year is going to change those laws. What might change those laws, of course, is federal action. Protections for transgender healthcare, protections for trans students, families, employment, housing, everything is the law in Minnesota. That can't change because of an executive order, but if they ever get their act together and pass some legislation, then we would be in trouble and we would have to figure out what the landscape looked like.
And I'd love to talk a little bit about, because I feel like so often when we talk about what's going on with trans folks, when we talk about the laws against trans folks, or even when we talk about abortion, it's in sound bites, and the media is not taking the time to really explain what is at stake, right? Drill down on what the proposals are federally and what they really mean for the lives of trans people.
The most important thing to understand about these barrage of attacks and executive orders from the Trump administration is that they are a campaign. They're more of a public social campaign against trans people than they are legal actions against our rights for now. You could see the way that they are, I use the term public terrorism campaign. They are trying to create an environment across the country in which trans people are not welcome to participate in public life, in which we will not have access to healthcare, in which equal employment opportunities are taken away from us. Landlords are able to discriminate against us. It is a return to a nation of discrimination. And it is not only being done to us. That is very important to be clear. We're just kind of the tip of the spear right now, where everything is being done under this idea that the American population doesn't want to protect trans people. I think that's false. I think they will find out very soon that what is happening now is not what people wanted when they voted for these men, but it's where we are. And when you drill down into the specifics and you get into like the attacks on healthcare, right? They're trying to take gender affirming care away from children. And what they try to do is make it so that people just don't understand that gender affirming care is medically necessary healthcare across the medical landscape. There's no other version of healthcare in which we do what is being done to trans people. They don't want to know, they don't want people to know that gender affirming care is largely mental health care. Occasionally, maybe you get prescribed a medication that is safe and effective and used for multiple other diagnoses that children have. And that surgery is a part of transgender healthcare, but far less than half of trans people in this country will ever have a gender affirming surgery. People want autonomy. This is what it's a Venn diagram with abortion and gender affirming care. It's just a circle. We are talking about healthcare autonomy for individuals to live the life that we choose, to be able to thrive and survive and find joy and love. And we can do that in a way that harms no one, but saves our actual lives. And they want to take that away from us.
And I think too, when we talk about kids, I have trans kids in my family, little kids who people know, just like, we know, right? And
Yeah.
just to let them wear their hair the way they want and have the pronouns they want, and to be spoken to in a way that is comfortable for them in their journey, like that's all part of it. And to deny and to not understand how we start our journey to become a whole person is different, and it's different steps, and it's all different. And I think that that gets lost so often when we talk about what care looks like when we're talking about gender affirming care.
Yeah, I've said a million times that when you see the difference, you know the truth. When you see a child on one side and the other side, right? There are conservative parents littered across this country who are supporters of gender affirming care because they had a child and they saw the difference before and after. It really is a political movement. It is not a medical movement, right? Because if you talk to doctors, if you talk to families, if you have a child in your life and you get to see them thrive and come alive in a way they never have, it's magical.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that a kid doesn't go to school and then doesn't come home for a couple of days and then a new person. That's not happening
Mm.
in our public
I
schools.
haven't heard of that happening, but I would be surprised if our public school teachers had time and resources to make that happen.
I
Yes.
mean, between that and the people going to the bathroom in the cat boxes, it's too much. I often say
Yeah.
children can be cruel. And if anything was happening in schools where another child could put it on film and put it on the internet, they would. The fact that it doesn't exist anywhere should let everybody know that that stuff
Yeah.
is not a thing. Okay. So we on this podcast constantly talk about basically we say your feminism isn't shit if it's not intersectional, and that means centering everybody who's most affected by the garbage laws and uplifting leaders in the communities that we can learn from and learn how to best fight and support. So when we talk about intersectionality with BIPOC folks, with queer folks, trans folks, women, abortion, totality, talk about what intersectional feminism looks like to you and how you would like to see it in practice more.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And the work that, you mentioned previously, my work around abortion, I'm the reproductive freedom caucus chair in the Minnesota House. That caucus really, to me, embodies this intersectionality of work. We have Representative Agbaje and the work that she has done on Black maternal health care. We have Representative Leigh Kozlowski, a Two-Spirit member of the Ojibwe Nation, who is doing work across the country on Indigenous Two-Spirit protections. There are leaders in every corner of our state. Representative Kali Vang, a Hmong woman who led this and led the charge on the ERA in Minnesota. We really have to have a full vision of what it means to participate in a feminist worldview. And I really appreciate Feminist Buzzkill and you and your work because I think, especially sometimes in my communities, people get a little nervous about that word. And it's like, no, we are looking to build a feminist future. And what that means is trans men. And what that means is our Black and brown and indigenous folks who often feel left out of progressive movements, right? These leaders in these spaces are the feminist future that we are building. A dear friend of mine, her name is Wajong, she has a line about the work we're doing is we are the practitioners of a world that does not yet exist, right? And it's an incredibly optimistic vision of not only the world that we want to bring into perspective, but we have to inhabit that world now. And as intersectional, coalitional feminist movement builders, we can't inhabit a intersectional future if we're not living in an intersectional present, if we're not doing that work hand in hand with the leaders who are here right now.
There's so many terrible tropes around like seat at the table. And my whole thing is fuck that table. We didn't have a say in building that table. So any table that has been built should be destroyed. And maybe we're sitting around on a couch. Maybe it's a whole different framework with which we come to. But if
Mhm.
only one set of values or experiences has set the agenda or the table, it can't be very sturdy.
Yes. Yes, that's a terrible. The table metaphor is one I've actually thought about because the idea for me in being in politics is to accumulate power and therefore to diffuse that power through the community, right? And the table metaphor is really about accumulating power and bringing it into the room where the table is.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to do is accumulate power in the capital and then leave with it and make sure it is given out to the people outside of the capital.
Yeah.
And I think, that's a revolutionary view of politics. I'm not the one who invented that, right? This idea that diffuse power is the future. It is not the accumulation of power. And I think if you look at, well, all of human history, but especially our moment in history, the accumulation of power as capital, it's driving every single community to turn against itself, right? It has been shown to be the goal, and it's the wrong goal. The goal is not accumulation of power. It is the diffusion of power.
I would be remiss to ask you. Oftentimes I ask my guests who are in the midst of the revolution fighting while the oppression is happening to you on the reg, right? So I think you're going to have some wisdom for folks about how to take care of yourself so that you are effective and how you navigate being a leader while also, you know, experiencing the societal violence.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's really difficult. Well, first of all, it's really difficult. And you said at the beginning, this is a thankless job. And I get a lot of thanks from my community, but this job is extremely difficult. And I think I thought I had an idea what I was getting into when I ran for office, and I had no idea what I was getting into. And I think it's really important for people to understand that and to understand that that is the lived experience of trans people everywhere, regardless of what our job is. We are living in a hostile environment. We are walking through spaces. Many of us cannot be closeted, right? My queerness is visible in every room. I'm coming out to every single person I interface with, no matter what. And it's tiring and it's taxing. And I take care of myself by recognizing who loves me and spending as much time as I can with those people. Now, I mean, I have colleagues and I have friends and I have people that I do the work with, but there's a smaller group of people who love me and who want me to be safe and who want me to do this work and retire, And those are the people I try to spend as much time as I can with. And then I'll just also add, being a trans movement builder during the apocalypse is incredibly clarifying, right? The values of what you are trying to do become very clear, and we just got to let the rest of it go. We don't have time for the rest of it. So what do you need to do to survive, to build the movement, and then let some stuff go?
Thank you so much. I want to close out just by asking you, what can cis folks do? What can people who are allies and supporters and advocates for folks in the trans community do to take some of that load off of you and help the communities feel safe?
Yeah, I would tell folks, well, first of all, realize that there's no reprieve coming, right? This is where we are. This is where we're going to live. It's going to be a long, long time, and it's going to be hard for a long time. So join a movement, but then stick to it. Volunteer for your nonprofit or your organization, but then stay with them for the next 5 to 10 years. But more to the point, one of the things that I ask people to do is really give thanks to the people who are helping us live, right? Right to your friendly congressperson or your local legislator or your mayor. If you have people in your family who are trans and who are receiving that care, those doctors are under an immense amount of threat and pressure as well. Let them know that you're grateful, that they are going to continue to provide this work and that you support them. Just carrying the load for us, not just in what is hard, but in what is good, and letting the world know that you want us to continue to be a part of this life, because that's what we want. And we know that's what you want too, but they want you to not say that to people. They want to make us so toxic that you don't want to congratulate a trans person on their transition, but give thanks for our existence. That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. Well, Leigh Finke, I am so thrilled that you are representing Minnesota and that you are creating and growing Minnesota as a place for people to come when they are not safe, and that you are helping educate and make Minnesota a wonderful place for all those things. Thank you so much for joining us. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much, Liz. It's a pleasure. I'm grateful for you. I love your work. Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, tell people where they can find you.
I'm on Instagram, Leigh4MN, and Blue Sky at Leigh Finke.
Perfect. Ms. Finke, I'm proud to be part of the filthy DEIs along with you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Thanks, Leigh. Please follow Leigh on all the things. Her work is so important, and it will help you be a better activist when fighting for trans rights. As you know, we couldn't do this podcast without the generosity of our fake sponsors, and this episode is brought to you by Acquiescence. Tired of waking up exhausted from doom scrolling and smelling of sweat-soaked sheets? Finding it hard to shower but know you need to do something to mask your hopelessness? You need Acquiescence. Acquiescence is an all-purpose spray for those days when you can't find the strength to operate a zipper, the shower dials, or your own best interest. Whether it's your cooch or your couch, just a spritz of Acquiescence can bring back that fresh smell you only get when you sit back, relax, and finally let the patriarchy take the wheel. Acquiescence. Defeat has never smelled so good. One of the biggest reasons we're in this current American hellscape, especially the one that has decimated our reproductive freedoms, is because legacy media and politicians have never invested in having dedicated people with reproductive health expertise in their newsrooms or on their staffs. My next guest has built a career in legacy media and has recently become the executive director of Rewire News Group, the only national nonprofit media organization exclusively dedicated to reproductive and sexual health rights and justice. And if you're a regular listener to the Buzzkills, you know we love to fuck with Rewire, amplifying their work and collaborating with the incredible Imani Gandhi and Jessica Mason-Piccolo, aka the hosts of Boom Lawyered podcast. I'm so excited to be talking to Mallory, as she is the perfect person to help us navigate the media madness at this moment. Please welcome Mallory Johns.
Thank you so much for having me, Liz. I'm just so excited to be here.
Look, I'm so excited to have you here, to have you at Rewire, to have you in the movement. I am thrilled. And, you know, people have been raving about you, so it also feels really good to be like, have you talked to Mallory yet? I'm like, so before we talk about Rewire and what's going on, tell folks a little bit about your background working in traditional media spaces.
Yeah, and what you were saying is 100% true. I spent the past 2 years at the Associated Press, which is the pantheon of legacy media. If you talk to any J school types, I did not go to J school, so I already have that little strike against me in the book of legacy media-ites. So I spent 2 years there really helping to shape the AP's approach to digital. I helped them to create this cool little thing called apnews.com, which is their shiny new website, reaching digital and younger audiences. Before that, I spent about half a decade at Vox Media, which kind of wrote the script on digital journalism and this shift to reaching audiences more directly and where they are. And before that, I spent some time at Engadget.com, which is a kick-ass tech blog that's still plugging along all these years later. And I spent some time at Popular Science magazine, RIP. I say RIP because they were bought out by venture capitalists and they no longer publish the magazine anymore. It's still a website, so you should definitely check them out.
I love Popular Science.
It was such a fun place for me to come up and to really figure out my voice. My background is in the arts. I'm a musician by trade, and I'm also a student of history. For me, it was the choice between, am I going to be a history professor or am I going to go to music school? I chose music school.
I chose comedy or history, and I did comedy.
My parents were not happy, but now they're kind of happy. Hi, mom and dad, I made it. I'm here. But I really do think that my passion for history just kind of won out in the end. And I found myself in media in the 2010s after the recession, really trying to chart my path as a Black woman, which again is something that legacy media, they say they love, but we know how they feel about people of color. And working in legacy media, I worked with many different types of individuals, really cut my teeth on social strategies, audience development, and growth. But I never really found my niche, an organization that was speaking to me as a Black woman and speaking to women, frankly, and people who identify as women, people of color, LGBTQ plus individuals, and really speaking towards marginalized communities. And I really started to experience this sense of unease, especially when I was at the AP, as we were getting closer and closer to the 2024 general election. I spent a lot of time at this amazing women accelerator, the Pointer Institute. And I was surrounded by other women, many of whom were working in nonprofit media, many of whom were working at niche, issue specific, topic specific organizations. And I thought to myself, I would like to run an organization that speaks to women, that speaks to Black women, that's talking about reproductive issues, that's talking about how to prepare for parenthood or not parenthood. I'm someone who's perimenopausal, so it's definitely at the forefront of my mind. I've struggled with infertility, as many women and people who identify as women have. And I would sit in these meetings where I was hearing these headlines being thrown out. And I would be saying to myself, why are we not speaking a little bit more truth to power? We see what the Project 2025 playbook is doing. It's there. It's not a surprise. And yet we were dancing around different ways to talk about the policies that we're now seeing enacted. And I didn't think, frankly, that I could be someone who could lead that organization. But when Rewire came up onto the space, I basically said, oh, this is a place where I can see myself really having an impact. And I kind of took a chance. Rewire loved me. I loved them right back. And here I am, 2 months into my tenure, really at a place where I can have that impact and really speak truth to power in the reproductive rights space.
And I love that because when I decided to sort of I was kind of had my political awakening, like I'm older in the first Gulf War when I just watched all these terrible narratives, and even at the Daily Show, and even in all of my sort of iterations of combining comedy and everything, nobody ever wanted to talk about issues of reproductive health, rights, and justice. And it seemed to me, as I was devouring information from all of and back in the day, there was only legacy media, right? And they would have somebody who was an expert on the Supreme Court. And so they could talk about the Supreme Court, but there wasn't, like you said, the experiences of Black women, the experiences of women, the experiences of queer people whose lives change dramatically as we age, what we go through. When you talk about perimenopause, menopause, also all the shit that happens to us. It feels like the goal is to erase us, in a way, just like our story shouldn't matter, because if we tell our stories enough, there may be some men out there who give a shit. So you kind of answered my question about what brought you to Rewire. And so I think I want to just follow up on that and say, as we talk about Bezos and Zuckerberg and bending a knee, and you mentioned the AP, but like even the AP being like tossed out of the
That's
Space because
wild.
they won't say the Gulf of America.
Absolutely wild.
Right? So talk about the work of Rewire and why independent spaces, especially independent spaces that are specifically focused on reproductive health, rights, and justice, need to be supported and uplifted.
It's kind of ironic. I actually am kind of doing a tour of my own, talking to different organizations to explain to them, because Rewire is often branded as an advocacy group. And we do obviously have our own agenda, of course, which is trying to further information, combat misinformation and disinformation around reproductive rights. But we're also a journalism organization. We are not just a niche fringe advocacy group. In my mind, I see that this is life-saving information. I see this as reproductive justice affects everything. I'm always talking about the intersectional areas with repro, and I see that repro intersects with democracy, public health, human rights, the beauty industry. My staff has heard me say this a number of times, but my soapbox is hair relaxers and how it's affecting reproductive health for Black women and causing Black maternal crisis. In my own life, my own family has dealt with those issues, and no one is talking about it. The Crown Act, all of those things intersect with the repro space. And to me, I think that the attacks on the reproductive rights are just part of these broader efforts to dismantle democratic institutions, as you said before, and as I've said, like silencing these marginalized communities and then restricting bodily autonomy, which will have a direct effect on democracy as a whole.
I agree. And, right before you, we had an incredible Minnesota state legislator named Leigh Finke, who is the first trans woman to be elected in Minnesota. And she wrote the trans refuge bill. And we were talking about this very thing and how we will suffer if we are not working together and we do not see that I should be invested in your entire being as we should all be invested in all of ours. And, to the point that you made in talking about like journal advocacy or journalistic neutrality, I personally think it's bullshit because I don't know. Facts are facts. And sometimes people try to make it that facts have bias because the facts don't align with what they want the truth to be.
Hmm.
So I guess I want to ask you, is there really such a thing as journalistic neutrality, and how has both sidesism sort of just undermined the information we get as a whole?
Well, I'll say that both sidesism has led us to where we are now in this current political climate. Frankly, sitting in rooms, I won't name names of rooms I've been in where people were afraid to call out the fascism that we're seeing in front of our very eyes and not being brave enough or willing to put that in the headline. And I think that directly is a correlation to what we're seeing now. I've been talking to a lot of individuals who are also saying that the anti-abortion movement created the playbook for Jan 6 and the resurgence of white supremacy that we're seeing here in this country. So I think a spade is a spade, and as journalists, it's our responsibility to call that out.
Yeah, and the work we do at Abortion Access Front has been that's one of our big things is tracking the anti-abortion movement. And also it's so fascinating because they have written the playbook, and because guess who tracks like extremists? Mostly bros, right? So the bros don't want to listen to us when we're like, "Hey, have you heard of this guy? Because he's in all the meetings and he's also outside of our clinics." And they're like, if we haven't heard of him, he's probably not that important, and you're just like, oh my God. It's so wild to try to, be in all of these spaces when you have information and you're just ignored. And I remember when I decided that I was going to kind of go from being like a satirist around politics and stuff and really focus on abortion. I had a couple of men comedy writers say to me, and this is the quote, "Why would you go into the female ghetto
Oof.
and like focus on that?" And I was like, because people like you are out here in these streets saying the female ghetto,
Wow.
and people love you and think you're progressive men. And like, yeah, so it's that kind of shit that I think that people don't understand we deal with all the time. And one of the things I wanted to ask you just around the media landscape that we're in, and it's just like media and information, like just like
Yeah.
how people get all their shit, right?
Yeah.
People are just able to just stay in their own information bubbles,
Yep. Yep.
surround themselves with confirmation bias. And that to me seems like one of the biggest obstacles to sort of break in with new ideas or be able to get something to somebody who can be open to like, hearing a new way. So I guess my question for you is with media goals at Rewire or just in general,
Hmm.
do you think it's more valuable to create content that tries to bring facts to those spaces? Or is it more valuable to try to reach sort of apathetic, like-minded people and activate them? Or is it something else entirely?
Yeah, it's definitely a combo. And to your point about the attacks, we're experiencing that. We're currently shadow banned on Instagram. We've been banned on TikTok. We've come back onto TikTok because a lot of antis were saying that we were misinformation. So we do need to be everywhere. We do need to be reaching those audiences and the off chance that someone is searching for essential information about their health. I like to say that we don't just cover abortion and abortion rights. We provide that essential analysis and commentary about you and your health and what you care about. And for me, I'm trying to reframe our staff to thinking about our coverage on an impact basis. What happens next? What do we want our audience to do with this information that we're providing them? How do we turn that awareness into action? Whether it is getting involved on a local or national level politically, that's great. If it's supporting organizations committed to change like AAF, even better. But I think that we just need to constantly be focusing with that North Star of how are we combating misinformation and disinformation and getting our audience to take action and do something. I think that we need to start turning people from being apathetic into action oriented, because that's frankly how people like me of my generation, elder millennials, went through the last Trump administration and became activated. I joined Popular Science in 2017 because I couldn't sit there writing press releases about the next iPhone. And I wanted to do something. And that's why I left and went to Pop Sci. And that brought me on this journey, I think, to Rewire. So we need to start turning people from apathetic into action oriented individuals in whatever form that looks like.
I love that. And I also think like you just can't seed ground. We have to develop a thick skin if we're going to be the people who are bringing information. And just being able to populate any space with information that is something different than what they're seeing, it could break through to somebody. And so you might not have to engage. Like I haven't left X, but I don't post there anymore. And sometimes I just will, and I don't care what the comments are, and I really
Mhm.
don't care. Like also everybody has my dad at this point, so I'm kind of fucked. But I do think that's right. And so I love that you said, you really want people to, as you're reporting, also giving them objective action items they can take so that they're not filling up with a doom scroll or even articles that are of truth, but just feel hopeless. I mean, that's part of our mantra too. So I'm going to ask you, I asked Leigh also, talk to me about how you navigate this information, especially the toxic information well.
Yeah.
And then also find what are your self-care tools and what are your tools to keep yourself, I don't even know if hopeful is the right word, but I guess it is a little bit because we have to believe that human beings will jump to a call to action. But how are you doing it?
Yeah, I would say that I'm really trying hard to limit the amount of time that I'm on the internet consuming news. I have my dumps of information. So my morning dump is I'm in the shower listening to 5 podcasts back to back to back, whether it is your mainstream hits like The Daily or NPR, or I'm listening to a beauty podcast, or I'm listening to a financial podcast, and then I'm going through tons of newsletters. You might be starting to see a trend in how I like to consume my media these days is within these spaces of podcasts and newsletters. I personally think those are the two biggest areas for growth for media organizations and audience growth. If we can take any lessons from this past election, we could see that 2024 was the year of the podcast. So I really try to frame my consumption around those spaces. And so I'm not doom scrolling on Instagram or TikTok or X all day long, which I do a fair amount of. And then something I'm constantly telling my staff this past month has felt like a year. I literally said that to someone today is to take breaks. It's okay to step away. It's okay to go for a walk. I've got a dog. I love my like noon lunch walk. It's on my calendar for everyone on the staff to see at noon. I'm not at my desk. I'm walking my dog. At 5 p.m., I'm working out. No negotiables with that. And then I'm a musician, so I managed to squeeze in like 10 minutes to just play some piano today. I am obsessed with reading romantasy, as I think most of book talk is these days. So I've been reading my Court of Thorn and Roses, my Throne of Glass. I'm reading the Empyrean series and Onyx Storm. So I'm really trying to escape into these fantastical women-centric worlds while going back into the fight when I'm ready and when I can handle it.
I love that. And you hit something that I have heard, and that is if you want to help people build resilience, paying attention to beauty podcasts and romance and all of that, finding out what people are doing for their own self-care so that you actually can make sure that they're constantly being reminded of spaces and places that they can go to find that space of respite.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how the revolution will be independent and how people can help uplift independent media and why people need to be supporting it.
I mean, obviously, the biggest way to support Rewire and all
Yes.
independent organizations is going to a donate page. RewireNewsGroup.com/donate would be the biggest help. Consuming content from independent media is also very important. You mentioned our fabulous podcast, Boom Lawyered. I'm a huge podcast nerd, so I knew of the podcast before I came to Rewire. And I truly do believe that podcasts are one of the few spaces left where you can own your message, you can own your narrative. You can own the facts and get it out to your audience in a way that doesn't have to deal with the algorithms and what some oligarch is thinking about at any given point of the day. And then newsletters. I feel like newsletters are also an important way to support independent media. We just saw with the handbasket. I'll give Marissa Cabas a shout out, scooping everyone, including my old alma mater, on what's happening at the OMB with the Doge Bros. It was a one-woman show, a Substack newsletter. I'm not saying Substack is the platform to choose. They have their own issues, but supporting those gumption reporters who are doing the hard work without the benefit of a staff, which I have, by themselves in a newsletter is one of the biggest ways that you can support independent media.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we are the ones that are not going to have to take a knee, and we are the ones that they can't shut down because we don't have corporate overlords telling us that we need to acquiesce to get in the good graces of this fuckwad. We don't want to report on him. The advantage is we don't want to. We don't have to. And so I love that. What are you looking forward to most in your new job, Mallory?
I think the biggest thing I'm looking forward to, and I just share this with the staff, is bringing the group back to Rewire News Group. A lot of people don't realize that we're more than a website. I see Rewire as a media ecosystem, and each of our platforms and brand extensions, from Boom Lawyered to our newsletter, The Fallout, to our social franchises that our fabulous team of one social media manager is producing, such as Over the Counter and Debrief. Those all elevate and drive our mission and help us build community in this secular flywheel effect, if I'm going to use some business school terms. And I'm very excited to expand our podcast operations. You can look out for some new shows from us later this year. I'm excited to have Boom Lawyered come back onto video later this year. I'm excited to potentially launch a membership program for Rewire News Group so you can support us in different ways with different types of models, such as Patreon, for example. And then I'm just excited about the opportunity to really mentor the next generation of journalists who want to leave mainstream legacy media to go independent, or who are people who are going directly from J school to us. We just relaunched our internship program, and we've got 2 fabulous interns joining us from J schools that are currently at well-known J schools that are feeders to legacy media. So I'm hoping that we can build that pipeline to tell that next generation that you don't have to go legacy. You can come to an independent, mission-driven organization and see real impact.
Well, I just want to say too that if it wasn't for Rewire, people wouldn't know half of the shit that's going on right now. If it wasn't for Boom Lawyered, if it wasn't for Rewire, your social pages, all of your stories, and the writing of Jess and Imani. And I think people don't understand that so often the work that is done by indies is lifted by these other people
Yeah.
and then get without credit taken. So Mal, tell people where they can find you and where they can support you, because I'm so excited to be in collaboration with y'all, and I feel smarter and thankful for it.
Right back at you. I've just been completely blown away by the support that you've given me and you've given Rewire in my short time here with the team. And I'm just excited for everything we're going to do together this year and throughout this crazy, crazy Trump 2.0 administration. But you can find Rewire at rewirenewsgroup.com. You can find us on Instagram, same handle at Rewire News Group. You can find us on Blue Sky. You can find us through our podcast, Boom Lawyered, wherever you get your podcasts. You can go to our website and subscribe to our newsletter, The Fallout and The Uplift. If you want to learn about the hard-hitting news of the day, subscribe to The Fallout. If you want some good, uplifting news, subscribe to The Uplift, or why not both? And then obviously, as I mentioned before, rewirenewsgroup.com/donate. We can't do anything without the financial support of our individual donors.
And it's tax deductible. Tax deductible. So
Exactly. And if you want to find me, I am at mmsuperflyjr on Instagram.
oh my God, that's amazing. We'll put all of those links in our show notes. Mallory, I'm so excited to talk to you early in your stead at Rewire. There's so many plans. I know you're going to do great things, and I'm really excited to see the growth of Rewire under the Mallory Johns oeuvre. Very excited. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Abortion Access Front.
Now for some scoop, y'all. Save the date, April 3rd. The Buzzkills and the Boom Lawyered podcast are teaming up to do one big, hilarious, informative live show in DC at the Black Cat. Tickets will go on sale very soon, and when we have the deets, we will never stop blabbing about it. You want to come? Another reason to join us in DC for the Supreme Court oral arguments. April 3rd, we cannot wait. And we gave you a lot of information, and so I just want to remind you, as always, all of our stories will be in the show notes, and you can find the best, most up-to-the-minute resources on accessing abortion care and funding for your care on our website, aafront.org. Our Charlie chatbot on the bottom right of the screen will walk anyone, anywhere in the country through their options and resources for abortion. That's our show, Moji. We missed you, but we thank y'all for listening. And I want to thank, again, Mallory Johns and Representative Leigh Finke. And remember to thank a provider giving gender-affirming care and support your trans community. Send them something to make sure they know you love them. Did we make you smarter today? Make you laugh? Show us some love again by liking, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating. Plus, you can stay connected on social media all week with us at Abortion Front across all platforms. With your help, we can get more people to learn about the assaults on abortion access. So, looking for where you might want to fit in and do some abortion activism? We got a 5-part training series called Operation Save Abortion at operationsaveabortion.com. And while you're there, you can visit our super cool activist calendar, which is chock full of local and national actions and educational opportunities. Check to see if there's something nationally or something in your community. This week's featured action is a virtual webinar from Repro Action. Open to all, this event runs Tuesday, February 25th from 12 to 1 p.m. It's a great seminar where you can learn the difference between emergency contraceptives and medication abortion, because they are not the same. It's a great way for you to become the brains of your friend group and school people when they start dropping some bad knowledge. You can find the link to sign up for the webinar in our show notes. And when it comes to adopting a clinic, we like to feature one each week. This week, we're highlighting the Friends of the Wild West Access Fund of Nevada. They're seeking gift cards that can assist with travel needs for patients seeking care, so head over to their site to donate. If you want to get more involved, but not sure how, you can always sign up to volunteer at our website, aafront.org, and we can figure it out together. And next week's pod's a doozy. From the Mississippi Reproductive Freedom Fund, serving patients across the South, co-founder and executive director Lori Bertram Roberts is here. Plus, we'll catch up with comedian, writer, actor, national treasure, and beloved board member of Abortion AF, Joyelle Nicole Johnson. Join our Patreon. You'll support great content and get cool merch and experiences. All pledges support this pod and all of our activism at Abortion Access Front. To pledge, go to patreon.com/Feminist Buzzkills. FBK is edited by Remy DeTarnay and is produced by Abortion Access Front. And finally, we leave you with Christian nationalist Wesley Todd, a man who shows us his whole ass with his take that having baby brain is a fireable offense.
I think of women serving in office. There was a federal representative, so at the federal level, and she's 8 months pregnant, so she can no longer go to vote. And she's sponsoring this bipartisan legislation so new parents can, who are congressmen or women, can vote when they're new parents. All it's going to take, and she got a bunch of backlash for it, and I think more will come, is a bunch of people to stand up and go, wait, do I want an 8-month pregnant woman voting on legislation and deciding different economic, rule of law, and civil things for our nation? Of course not. Mm-hmm. That's stupid.
Yep.
Feminist Buzzkills, the podcast from Abortion Access Front. New episodes drop Friday. When BS is poppin', we pop off. And if you want to support our podcast and all the work of Abortion Access Front, like, subscribe, and join our Patreon at patreon.com/feministbuzzkills.